Hello, everybody. My name is Mason Klein. I'm a product taxonomist with IDA, and today we're going to talk about digital asset management. We're going to go over some of the major concepts and assets that you might manage in a DAM. So with that, let's get started. Okay, so digital asset management, you may have heard me abbreviate it as DAM, and I will refer to it as DAM throughout this presentation, is a system, usually a software system, for processing, storage, retrieval, and publishing of digital assets. DAMs have a variety of applications. IDA's core business is around product information, and so DAMs have a really important part to play in the product information ecosystem. They also have a variety of other uses. So media companies might use DAMs to manage other types of digital assets. Brand advertising management is a big part of DAM. Document management and creating documents is a huge functionality for DAMs, as well as large enterprises might use DAMs to sort of manage all of their assets. So some top DAMs in the marketplace. This is just based on my survey, but DAMs, they have some of them have different specialties. So sort of on the left here, you'll see some of the DAMs that are integrated with content management systems. A major one would be Adobe Experience Cloud, Sitecore, Widen. Some are really focused on managing brands and advertising. So Binder is a specialist in marketing, Canto, Celum, Brandfolder. Some are really focused on images like PhotoShelter and Imagen, and others are really focused on documents and text like OpenText. But when we talk about DAM, we can talk about a variety of different systems. So a really simplistic DAM might be just a system of folders on a shared drive where people manage their digital assets. On the sort of right-hand side of this continuum are these really sophisticated software systems with a lot of functionalities. And the DAMs we saw on the previous slide are going to be these more sophisticated DAMs that are sort of the two darkest circles in this continuum. But really, a DAM can be thought of as sort of any system you have for managing digital assets. What do we mean when we talk about digital assets? Digital assets are things like images, documents, video, audio, even programming or web code can be thought of as a digital asset. It's any sort of asset that you want to manage in the digital sphere. So common image type assets might be a product image, a brand logo, images for a website, photographs, advertising, or even CAD drawings. Documents can be things like instruction manuals, product spec sheets, drawings or contracts. It could also include things like product catalogs. DAMs can also be video or audio content, so advertising videos, security footage, presentation recordings. It could be podcasts, it could be music, any sort of digital asset. One that's often overlooked is code. So DAMs can be used to store code. If you have like a testing module or a feature set, things that you're going to be reusing as you're coding, DAMs can be an important place to store those assets as well. So I'm going to now start talking about some of these assets in detail. And the most important asset for DAM that we're going to focus on is images. Images, they're really important for obviously e-commerce and products, which is where IDA often interacts with DAM. And so some of the key functionalities around that would be like creating thumbnails, auto-resizing images, rendering images in different formats. So CMYK and RGB are different ways that you can render the color in images. So a DAM might be able to switch in between those different formats. Image rights management is also a really key functionality of DAM, and we're going to talk about rights management a little bit more in detail further into the presentation. But oftentimes making sure that your license is sufficient for how you're going to be using those images is a really important functionality that DAM has. Image search, as well as integrations. So one of the really important parts of DAM, and we're going to explore this as well in more detail, is integrating DAM with other content consuming systems. So whether you're publishing that to a website or you're going to publish it to another piece of software to edit the images, those integration points tend to be a really important part of DAM. So when IDA would probably interact with DAM, we're going to be working with product images. And product images, the big work around those would be creating the metadata. Here you can see a screenshot from a DAM called Selim, which gives you some sort of example type metadata that you might actually see in use. As well as on the left, we have a list of different types of metadata that could be captured around an image. Now, different schemas will, of course, have different metadata requirements, and there are standardized schemas, like if a big content consuming system like Amazon is going to have some required metadata that you're going to need to put in order to put your product on Amazon. And so it really just depends on the project itself about what kind of metadata you want to capture. But some things that I just would like to call out here. So description, image description is a really important piece of metadata. Alt text is a little bit different than an image description. Alt text is going to support some of the handicap accessibility functions of images, so describing images for people who are visually impaired. And the other thing I want to highlight here are keywords. You can see in the Selim example, they call those tags or AI tags. These tags are really important for not only organizing images within the DAM, searching images, and also filtering. So we'll see some further examples of that, but tagging images tends to be a really important functionality of DAMs. Here's an example of how you might fill out some image metadata. So this is a SKUs.com image, and we have a name. Image naming, it might seem like a really simple thing, but it actually ends up being a very important part of DAM. Here, the image name is actually formatted to reference the location within the taxonomy that this image goes. That's also made more explicit in a category reference metadata field and a breadcrumb reference. But image naming tends to be a really important functionality, and controlling image naming as you add new images to DAM also is an important functionality. You can see here also in this example, there's a rights metadata field, which, has to do with those digital rights management and what you can do with these images. And then you can also see some examples of description versus alt text, and as well as some of those keywords. So when we prepare images to put into DAM, this is an example of what that might look like, what the work that IDA might be doing to prep those images and make sure metadata is completely filled out. Now, obviously, this is an example, so you're going to have more columns with additional metadata fields in a deliverable, as well as more rows when you have more than just the 6 image examples here. But there are some things that I also would like to call out on this slide, which is that images can have a lot of different functionalities. So Here you could have a category image, a SKU image, a product image, a hero image, which is sort of web speak for an image that goes across the top of a website, as well as a header, which also would kind of go across the top of a web page. When you're creating images for a content consuming system, it's important that the images conform to a product image standard. So product image standards enforce consistency and quality in the image, and they're standards that are typically set by a marketing team or a team that's in charge of the content consuming system. So what do we mean when we talk about image standards? We're talking about like the background style. Is it clear or is it opaque? What is the image orientation? What is the camera perspective? Image fill. This image fill standard is actually one that I found on Amazon's image standard page, and it basically states that the image should take up the item should take up 85% of the image space. And so those kind of standards help enforce consistency when you're putting product images on a website from a lot of different vendors and a lot of different sources and manufacturers. These image standards really help make sure that the website appears like a cohesive experience. Zoomability, file format, those are also common image standards. You'll find that there are bodies that produce image standard guidelines. So I believe GS1 has image standards, but also major retailers and content like systems would have image standards that would be sort of your baseline. And then when you have a more sophisticated marketing operation, they're going to have a really detailed set of image standards. This is just something to be aware of. It's really something for people who are creating the images, but when you're putting these images into DAM, it's important to be aware of these sorts of standards. So another major type of asset that might be in DAM would be video and audio. Here we have a screenshot from Binder, a DAM software, and you can see it has some functionality for mixing and editing video and audio. That most DAMs are going to have some basic mixing, editing, cutting functionality, but it's also going to have an integration with probably a more sophisticated video editing or audio editing software like Adobe or something like that. Some of the typical metadata is going to be a little bit different from an image metadata. So, play length, sections, chapters, indexes, tables of contents, filters, those sorts of things are going to be important for these specific asset types. So if you're, working with a DAM or, bringing a new DAM on board to your enterprise, making sure that the functionality that you need for your requirements is going to be important. And selecting a DAM that specializes in these types of assets might be important if these are core assets to whatever you're trying to do. Another sort of in between video and image that's worth calling out is a 360-degree image. So a 360-degree image, it can come in a variety of formats. The example here I have is a GIF. So a GIF could be a 360-degree image. This is from the Widen DAM, but the type of 360-degree image that you have and you can use to make a more interactive experience for customers is really going to depend on the DAM technology. So GIFs are one example. Another way you could do this is by photographing every angle and then inputting that into a DAM, which can then create this kind of digital experience. Some DAMs actually have specialized 360-degree image formats. And then you can also sometimes use a 3D design or a 3D model, which could be read by a DAM and served up to a content system, which would allow a user to sort of click through and explore an image in 3D. Now, there are also a lot of different technologies around these 360-degree images. So it's possible to use a still photograph and move the product different angles and capture that and knit together a 360-degree image. There are also 360-degree cameras, which capture the full 360 image at once. And there's also the idea that the image can be in the center and the view can come around the image, or the point of view can be in the center and you can be looking around yourself in 360 degrees. You might see that like in a real estate website where you have a virtual tour. So people often talk about these assets. They're really important assets because they provide a lot of interactivity, which can help increase sales and conversions. So it's important to be aware of these, but one of the things to just keep in mind is that it comes in a lot of different ways, and so there are different angles to this to just consider. Okay, so I mentioned programming code can be another important asset that's stored in DAM. Code, we think of it as text or sort of written content, and DAM is important, has some important functionalities that make using code really, really useful as an asset in DAM. So workflows can be controlled in DAM, roles can be set up, like Kanban boards, and we'll talk about some of those functionalities in a little bit more detail. But DAM can be really used as a way to help prepare something for production, for live use, and so code is a key asset that can be used in DAM. Versioning is also another functionality which we'll discuss in a little bit more detail. So code versioning can be stored in DAM. Here we have an example from Adobe Experience Cloud Assets, which is their DAM, and showing how you can use code in that system. Documents are another really key asset. So documents like PDFs, text files, Microsoft documents that you may be familiar with. Also more sort of specialized documents like CAD file, which is sort of in between like an image and a document. Engineering specs, engineering designs, those could all be thought of documents that you might store in a DAM. And depending on the DAM and its functionality, you have different uses for DAM for documents within the DAM. So you might be using a DAM like OpenText, which has kind of a legal focus to work on legal documents, which people are collaborating on and making sure that you have the right version going out. It also has some like case tracking functionalities, so you can keep track of your court cases. So that's OpenText. So those might be some uses, some document functionalities within a DAM. You could also think of a DAM as being used to produce documents. So a lot of DAMs are used to produce product catalogs. So you're gathering images, you're gathering text content, you're assembling them into a catalog, and the DAM helps you control that workflow and publish that catalog. DAM also might support translation, automatic translation, creating relationships between documents, and like I said, managing publishing workflows and assembling documents with other content. So when you put all these assets into a DAM, you're going to put them into an asset taxonomy. Asset taxonomies, they are not the same as product taxonomies, which IDA might be more familiar with building, but they can reflect product taxonomies. So There are a lot of different ways that you can organize your assets. Some of the most sort of common or key ways to do it would be like by asset type or by organizational division within an enterprise or within a company. Maybe it would be the asset taxonomy might reflect your workflow. So making sure that the right assets in the right states are within the taxonomy so people can find them in different states of completeness. Like I said, there could be different branches for types. It's possible to have a very deep taxonomy, but I would say most taxonomies tend to be pretty flat and focused on searching. So we talked about image tagging earlier, filling out metadata. Those are really going to be the ways that you organize assets and retrieve assets from a DAM, more so than organizing in a really deep taxonomy. But it really just depends on the requirements of the DAM and how you're using it. One of the themes that kind of comes up that you might notice is that DAMs have to be really flexible. So how you're using the assets, what your ultimate goal is for these assets is really going to structure how you're dealing with metadata, with the asset taxonomy, with some of the content requirements of the DAM. So versioning is a really important functionality that you'll find in most DAMs. When we think back to that continuum of DAMs where the most simple DAM is just a series of folders on a shared drive, in that case, versioning is really going to be based on the naming conventions. So you can kind of see here, draft 1, draft v2, draft v3, proof, final. But more sophisticated DAMs allow for what's called virtual versioning. Virtual versioning is where the image and the image name is stable, but the DAM actually stores digital backups, which reflect the different changes that happen to the document. So when the different versions are created. You may have experienced this with SharePoint or with some of the online versions of Microsoft Office programs where you can restore it back to a version. Even though you save the document, it has those previous versions which you can back up to. So virtual versioning is kind of a key functionality that most sophisticated DAMs now support. Versioning is also really important in terms of workflow and publishing assets. So making sure that you have the correct version, the most up-to-date version, the version that is specifically geared towards whatever application you're using is really key functionality. And DAM usually supports some sort of asset versioning. And also codes, like coding, versioning on coding, like I mentioned earlier, is another reason why code is often stored in DAMs. So digital rights management. Digital rights management you may be familiar with a little bit, but oftentimes when you're using assets, you don't own them outright. You actually just have the right to use them in a certain way. Sometimes this is called licensing. When lawyers think about rights, they think about a bundle of different rights that you can get. You can, sell some of them, you can rent some of them, but you don't have to, sell everything. And so rights are often limited in terms of like the use length or duration, maybe the context in which you're using it. Like you can use this on a website, but you can't print this into your product packaging. The number of times might be limited, so you can air my radio program 500 times, but no more. Or the ability to copy, sell, or transfer image assets or other types of assets or edit those assets could be limited. So DAMs oftentimes have functionality which helps you track and manage some of those rights limitations. So In this screenshot here we have from Binder, you can see they have a terms of use, basically metadata field, and they have it marked for internal use only. So if you have something that maybe you don't actually own the rights to, so you can't publish it, you would want to keep it internal only. So those are the different ways in which rights are often managed, or DAMs help you manage those rights. Usually it's around metadata fields, but there are also some more sophisticated protocols that DAMs can have in place to help you make sure that you're not using assets outside of your right to do so. So another major activity that might occur in DAM is tagging assets to different items or entities. A major part of how Industrial Data Associates work with DAMs would be using images and DAMs to associate to different products or categories or web product detail pages. These links can be created after the fact, but that tends to create a lot of work. The best sort of way to do this is to actually link these images or indicate where these images should be linked as you're creating them. And DAM can store these links, or other content consuming systems can store links to DAM in different tables or mappings or linkages. It's also possible to derive links to different types of items and entities. If you're gathering images from a manufacturer, for example, and you're a distributor and you want to put them on your website, you may derive a link based on the manufacturer's listing of what products are depicted by this image or what products are covered by this spec sheet. And so that is another possible way of gathering some of these linkages, but if you don't derive them or you don't create the linkages as you're creating the assets, it is a big project to go back and link some of these assets up. Integration is a really important functionality. So you don't want your assets to just remain in DAM. DAM should be a stop on the way to publishing them somewhere else. Assets are often created in a different system, whether that is, with a camera or with a text editor or some other system. And then DAM is really where you store, you edit, and you publish. So having these integrations which automate the exchange of assets between upstream and downstream systems is a big selling point for a lot of DAMs. DAMs, some of the most common integrations that you'll see with DAM are to CMSs, so content management systems, through to websites, to PIMS, product information management systems, or to different content platforms like YouTube. So having these automatic integrations really simplifies and speeds up the publishing of different assets to their content consuming systems. Generating metadata. So the process of generating metadata is similar to the process of creating linkages in that it's best to do when you're creating the asset at the very beginning. It sometimes can be really impractical to generate a lot of metadata after the fact. But oftentimes you don't know what metadata fields you're going to need until you're using the asset. So, you create a new website, you've got all these images, you realize you need some metadata field that is going to be needed to support functionality on that website. So when a new field is defined, it should be filled out as completely as possible. It's also sometimes possible to capture metadata programmatically. So metadata fields which concern aspects of a file that can be sort of auto-read, like resolution, size, file type. Those things could be generated programmatically. And it's also possible to scrape or derive some of these metadata fields from secondary sources. The example I gave about going back to the manufacturer to get image links kind of also applies here when you're generating metadata. So it could be scraped from the manufacturer's website or some other secondary source to generate some of this metadata. You have to be careful with that, of course, making sure you're scraping from reputable sources and that your software that you're using to capture that metadata is doing it so in an accurate manner. And then there's still obviously going to be the project of normalizing that data and making sure it appears in the format that you want for your metadata fields. So the sort of best practice of creating metadata as you create the asset still is good advice, even if you're going to use some of these other techniques to gather metadata. So asset search, this tends to be another really important functionality of DAM. When you're uploading assets to DAM, having complete metadata and tags or keywords is going to make asset search a lot more easy and useful. When you don't have metadata, when you don't have values indexed, when things are poorly labeled or incorrectly named, this makes finding assets a lot more difficult. As I sort of alluded to earlier, these tags or keywords can play a really important role in search. So not only do they provide sort of like power words or extra weight to search terms, tags and keywords can also support faceting. So faceting is a strategy where you use these tags to filter results in order to get a narrower range of results, and that is just going to allow you to find your assets more quickly. Over time, you can also apply a weighting strategy. A weighting strategy would look at the most common searches that people use to find specific products and weight those results more when you search those terms to increase your accuracy of search. But that is something that has to kind of be built up over time based on search patterns and search history. So keywording, I kind of talked about this a little bit. It's a really important functionality of DAM, and as a part of that, managing your keywords into a keyword dictionary with preferred keywords and non-preferred keywords is an important governance function of DAM. Here in this example from Conto, you can see they have the keywords as little sort of rounded boxes. So you can select keywords, you can search, and it will suggest keywords based on other keywords in your keyword dictionary. And having those in a normalized way is really important so that, the keywords allow you to make connections between different assets. Allows you to have the faceting functionality that allows you to sort of filter your results. It also is really important for SEO and for when you actually publish these assets to a website or some other content consuming system, having these keywords available is going to increase the search, the SEO of these websites by providing this data, which is a really key value add when you're filling out some of these keywords. Keywords can be generated by people who are putting the images into DAM. They can be harvested, so from descriptions, metadata, search histories, from contextual data around images like category data. But these keywords, they drive a lot of functionality, and so having them clean, having them normalized, and having them well filled out to assets is really important. Another thing that DAM can do is give you some key metrics and KPIs about your assets. In this example, you can see this is from OpenText, and it shows you their metrics dashboard. And it's a really important functionality to just sort of track where your assets are in the workflow, who is accessing assets, what types of assets you have, how many. And so these are some of the sort of major areas that metrics are kept on. So the four major areas that we're identifying here are metrics on the assets themselves. So things like asset count, types, metadata fields, how complete are those metadata fields, assets on the users, so who's interacting with your assets within DAM, how many people are doing that, are the people with the right permissions in there, what are people doing, what are their activities when they're in there, what sort of administrative actions are being performed on your DAM. You also want to have metrics on your system itself, so how many uploads are happening, what's happening with the server, what kind of security issues or error logs are you having? And then the other major area that metrics are often kept on are the interface metrics. So what are the links to outside systems that these dams these dams have? So what are the content links? What are the different systems they're linked to? Are they linked to specific products or categories or attributes or values? Having those and being able to summarize them into a metric and maybe even displaying them in a dashboard like we see here is a really key functionality of DAM. So understanding your assets, understanding metrics around your assets, yeah, that's something that DAM can do for you. Okay, so I've alluded to workflows in DAM a couple of times now, and DAM is not just a place to archive your assets. It's also an environment where you can have different people collaborating on assets and getting those assets ready for publishing in different channels. So it kind of depends on what the asset is for how you're going to be using this. But for example, if this was software, maybe it's development, staging, review, publication. If you're producing a product catalog, which we've seen clients do with Widen, it's, do we have the items? Do we have the linked images? Do we have the articles? Is it ready for publication? Oftentimes these workflows are illustrated using a Kanban. So in this example from Widen, you can see a Kanban with different columns for pitch, scheduled, in progress, ready for publication. But there are also other ways to create workflows and to represent workflows within a DAM. And those workflows are often highly customizable just based on your requirements and what you're creating and publishing to different channels. Related to the workflow is permissions and change management controls. So, if you have sensitive assets like a legal document or even brand or marketing materials or code, having different roles for different users is a really important governance tool, which allows you to make sure that the right people are accessing the right assets at the right part of the development phase for these assets. So you don't want somebody who doesn't know what they're doing going into your audio file and making some change or making some edit when you want that audio file ready for publishing to your podcast platform. Or you don't want somebody who's trying to get your brand image that you're getting ready for your catalog and change it to put on a website, because then, work has to be redone, work has to be undone. So having these controls around different user roles and different user permissions and different rules for how you can edit and change assets is just another really key aspect of DAM, which makes it a really useful tool for managing assets. So we're coming on a close of our presentation, and I just wanted to offer up a couple of different resources for people if you want to do some more investigation on your own in dams. We have some online glossaries which you can use to sort of familiarize yourself a little bit more with different language around dams. There are a lot of textbooks available. This one, which I have here, Digital Asset Management, Content Architectures, Project Management, and Creating Order Out of Chaos, was a good one that I read and helped me, explore a little bit deeper some of the issues around dam and some of the issues around setting up a new dam for a company. I also mentioned some of the image standards. So GS1, if you're not familiar, GS1 is a nonprofit organization that produces a lot of data exchange and standards for different applications. And they have an image specification standard that is really useful for if you're, creating image specification or image standards from like Greenfield, you don't have any legacy standards, conforming to a GS1 standard is not, a way to go wrong on that. So that concludes the presentation on DAM. I hope that you learned something, and I hope that you maybe feel a little bit more comfortable when people talk about DAM. I think that for the IDA team, this is going to seem somewhat familiar because there are a lot of analogs to PIM and product information management. But just thinking about it a little bit different because the focus is on these digital assets. So with that, I want to just thank you so much and hope you have a great rest of your day.